Thank you for being here today to talk to us about David T. Howard and the importance of the school and its history to this community. I'd like for each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us why you were so captivated by this particular story. Nasir, you have been identified far and wide as the expert on the history of David T. Howard and of the David T. Howard School. Tell us a little bit more about the man and about the institution that we're exploring today.
Yes, the historic David T. Howard Middle School was established in 1923 in the Atlanta public school system at a time when there was only one school for African Americans, which was Booker T. Washington. A son of Africa by way of Madagascar and an ex-slave donated the land to be established for education in this community, which is the Old Fourth Ward. The school operated up into the 1970s, and then of course, due to numbers, it actually closes and it becomes a museum under the Atlanta public school system. And the last 20, 30 years it actually set, and then those of us in the community fought for it to be reestablished, and now it's opening up for the new generation in 2020.
Masood, what inspired you to share the David T. Howard story at all? And why did you choose to do it the way that you did?
My name is Masood Olufani. I am a multidisciplinary artist based here in Atlanta, Georgia, actor and writer. Well, I really didn't know anything about David T. Howard, to be quite honest, when I was approached by Freedom Park Conservancy to execute this work of art. It was one of those stories that for me was kind of under the surface in terms of my knowledge of the history of significant people in Atlanta. I was very moved by his story, being someone who had been enslaved, and then following the issuing of the Emancipation Proclamation and the ending of the Civil War, he was actually able to acquire some resources based on a business that he was able to start, and then purchase some land. And on that land, he chose, instead of building a huge mansion, he chose rather to build a school that would educate the African American children of the city of Atlanta, which was quite remarkable to think that somebody that would come out of those circumstances would want to make this kind of investment in the future of the city. So I was inspired by his sense of perseverance, his commitment, his sense of service to the community. And I was just so compelled. It was very easy for me to want to dive into creating a work of art that would kind of showcase that aspect of the man and how that commitment to service also generated all of these remarkable people who came out of this school.
Oh, Corey, what captured your imagination about this story? What led you to create the beautiful composition that you did? And particularly with reference to Paul Robeson, tell us about that process of creation.
So my name is Okori Okecello Johnson. I'm a cellist, and I had the honor of composing a score, really a soundtrack for Masood's powerful piece of art that helps to kind of highlight and celebrate the history of the school. But most important, I was attracted to the opportunity to write a song about a piece of wood, about a tree that has lived through the life and the history of the city that I'm so powerfully attracted to, that has seen changes in people, that has seen changes in history, that has seen changes in racism, that has seen changes in demographic. And to use my instrument and to complement the communication of that powerful piece of wood, that tree that Masood shaped and fashioned, into something that I believe is timeless and hopefully connects communities and connects time periods. So all of that together makes this a really rich project to sink my teeth in as an artist and as a musician. I had an opportunity to spend some time, or to at least get some feedback from graduates of the Howard School. And one of the questions I asked them was, what was a song or what were sounds that they associated with their memories here? And I got some great songs, but one stood out. It was Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson is a really important figure, obviously within African American history, but also as a foundational figure of African American art here in this country. And what I really appreciated was the fact that there was a song that he wrote called Trees. And in that first verse of that song, or I guess he didn't write it, he performed it, But in the first verse of that song, it says, "I shall likely never encounter a poem as beautiful as a tree." I think there's such power and beauty in that line. I think there's such power and beauty in wood. I think there is energy. I think there is spirit. I think there is witness in so many ways to the things that happen around them. And I consider it a real great honor to be able to create a piece of music that starts with this kind of spiritual prayer that kind of recognizes the sacred things that have happened and the really important people who have passed through the school, to connect it to that song, Trees, which is embedded in the piece that I wrote. And then to connect that into something that has a contemporary feel to it, a groove. It has kind of a jazz, maybe even R&B feel to it. And for me, that was an exercise in connecting people, connecting histories, connecting communities, and connecting ideas. So that's what I tried to communicate with the piece that I wrote. And that's what I think the piece that Masoud has created, that's what I think it effortlessly does. So.
Nasir, what stoked your curiosity and inspired you about this story? I remember you sharing that you didn't initially think that you were going to undertake research about this man at all, and you stumbled upon him and couldn't stop digging. Tell us why.
The story actually starts with an African-American woman who has an orphanage in Covington, Georgia. Her name is Dinah Watts Pace. Her brother is one of the founders of Southview Cemetery, which is where prominent African-Americans such as Reverend A.D. Williams, Daddy King, and others are buried. And when I went through her history and some of the deeds and records of the financial supporters, this one man, David T. Howard, name continued to come up. So I was curious as to how an African-American man at that time was giving money to an institution that was not in Atlanta, east of Atlanta, and why. Come to find out, his daughter marries Frederick Douglass' grandson, who was the first African-American to be recorded as a violinist in American history. And their son ends up marrying Booker T. Washington's granddaughter. And so I was extremely connected with David T. Howard at that point.
Masoud, what stoked your curiosity about this particular story? Tell us a little bit about your process in coming to develop the art piece that you did.
One of the key elements of the work, which I was told was going to be something that had to be integrated into the process, was the use of this old growth elm tree that was part of a cluster of trees that kind of circumambulated the entire school, the grounds of the school. So I was able to use that and have that as be like kind of the anchoring, the conceptual anchoring of the work, as the tree is kind of like an elder. I mean, it's an old growth elm tree that's probably some 125 years old, so it's seen a lot. It's been a witness to a lot of the history in the city of Atlanta. And so in a very real sense, it's an elder. And then to incorporate also the hands of the elders, the people elders who were educated in this building, to have those two iterations of memory and meaning was a very powerful concept that I wanted to engage around, so yeah.
Nasir, you told me that this school opened in the 1920s and closed in 1976, and that when it closed, people in the community were pretty concerned, and many people, particularly alumni, were sad to see the school close. What do you think they feel now that it's reopened, and what do you think that reopening has to offer to this community?
The Alumni Association, myself, and many of those, of course, have passed on, but we were actively engaged in trying to make sure that the building came back up. It was asbestos, it was not being used, and there was records. I found records in the Atlanta Public School System from meetings where they were planning to demolish the building. And we flooded the Atlanta Public School System meetings every opportunity we could. Ended up being where you have a $50 million plus operation that's back in the Atlanta Public School System, and it's historic because it's the same school that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. graduated from.
Okori, this year's theme for the National Black Arts Festival is Rising Above. How does that relate to the piece that you created and other insights and feelings you might have about David T. Howard and the David T. Howard School?
And I think what I am excited about with this piece, both Masoud's piece and I hope the piece of music that I've written to complement it, is that it's helping us collectively as a community to rise above the kind of amnesia that comes along with progress. That there's a very rich and sacred history in this building and in this space, and that piece of public art in Freedom Park requires that we walk past and that we engage that history. And I hope that I've created a piece of music that helps to support that capture of attention and celebration of history.
Nasir, this year's National Black Arts Festival theme is Rising Above. How do you think that relates to the narrative of David T. Howard and the history of the school?
It fits into David T. Howard's vision in the sense that education, economics, politics, and religion. And as we see in the climate in America, especially in Atlanta, the South, right now, it's an upward movement, whether it's economics, whether it's political, whether it's social, and whether it's religious. This is still the Bible Belt. Atlanta is still the beacon mecca of the South. Considering the fact that we do have some challenges, it still is a beacon of hope in the South, and it's the most prominent city. It's the gateway to the South. So we still have that rise up spirit, whether it's in sports, athletics, economics, business, and education.
Masood, this year's National Black Arts Festival theme is Rising Above. How does that relate to the piece that you created?
Well, Rising Above is such a wonderful, I think, kind of way of looking at this work of art, because you know, as you approach the work and you see this old growth elm tree turned on its side, which is one of the original trees that dotted the landscape around the school. So it has seen a lot. It's been around for more than a century. And, you know, and it has this, in some sense, in a metaphorical way, it's this repository of memory and history. And then the hands that kind of grow out of it, which have been, you know, tethered onto the tree itself, are rising, reaching back across the street towards the school, indeed towards the Helene S. Mills, elderly care facility, which is across the street as well, and also reaching beyond towards the heavens. So there's this implied motion of reaching up, reaching out, reaching towards the future, and also to the past. So there's, in a way, this kind of collapsing of time, this linking of what has been to what is now, and possibly the possibility of what can be. And hopefully, in that sense, the sculpture in the end serves as a touchstone of inspiration, where we can recognize that essentially who we are now is because of who we were. And with a deeper understanding of that, we can chart a more progressive, a more upwardly mobile course for ourselves in the future.
Nasir, we've spent a lot of time talking about the past today, and I am certainly a proponent of the value of looking back as an historian. But I'd like to ask you, what is the relevance of this history for the issues and concerns that we face today?
I think Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois said it the best. When there is a lack of culture and a lack of appreciation for the arts, there is a downward in terms of the community, in terms of the growth. It's not incumbent upon us to just sit and watch. It's incumbent upon us to get involved. And by all of us getting involved, whether it's artistic, whether it's creative, whether it's whatever form of expression that we have to continue to embrace that, because a new generation is here and they are demanding that.
Thank you for your generosity in sharing your expertise and your passion for this project with us. Now we're going to turn our attention to a lively discussion so that we can learn more about David T. Howard and the school and where we go from here.